Hey fiddlers, welcome to today's fiddle video. Today we are going to be choosing bowings for a strathspey. Strathspeys are a kind of tune you'll find very often in the Scottish or Cape Breton traditions. They're super fun. Today's strathspey we're going to be talking about is a traditional tune called the Highlanders' Farewell to Ireland. Choosing bowing patterns can be a little mystifying, so today we're going to try and dispel some of the mystery, and I'll just walk you through how you might go about choosing bowing patterns for this tune. We'll go through 3 different ways that you could do the bowings. All of them will give it a little bit of a different feel. Also, if you'd like to just learn the tune, you can check out my tutorial on it. I'll provide a link for that in the description as well. I mostly play traditional Irish and New England fiddle music, so when it comes to Scottish and Cape Breton styles, these are just my thoughts on what has worked well for me and my observations of what others do. Okay, let's go ahead and learn bowings for the Highlanders' Farewell to Ireland. Okay, so first off, when we're talking about a strathspey, what are we dealing with? Your typical strathspey is in 4/4 time, so that's 4 quarter notes per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. So we're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. One thing that can set a strathspey apart from another kind of tune is the rhythm that you encounter in strathspeys. In strathspeys, we'll often be dividing those quarter notes into 2, but instead of equal eighth notes like this, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we're gonna often have this long, short, long, short, long, short pattern. Long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. That's often written as a dotted eighth and a 16th note. Something else you'll encounter in strathspeys, which is exceedingly strathspeyish, is a short, long pattern. Short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. And then you'll hear those 2 things mixed up an awful lot. For example, you might have a long, short, short, long, short, short, long. Or you might have a short, long, short, short, long, short. In some strathspeys, you'll also sometimes hear this cool thing where a quarter note is divided into 4 16th notes. So you might get something like this. And occasionally, though not in this strathspey, you'll hear a triplet happen. So you'll hear a quarter note divided into 3. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... But we're not dealing with that today. All right, so that's strathspeys. Let's talk about bowing patterns. A helpful question might be, what are our goals as we are choosing these bowing patterns? So why might we choose to slur some notes in one bow and keep other notes separate? There are a few different reasons for this. For me, an important one is just ease of playing. One way that bowings can make things easier is sort of making up for how far you've gone on your bow and getting you back to a place you want to be. Here's what I mean by that. If you play a quarter note in a strathspey, that might take you to the end of your bow, so you might want to put the next 2 notes in an up bow. The way you choose bowings can also help you minimize the effort that you put in with your right arm, with your bowing arm, just by putting more notes in one bow so you don't always have to be sawing back and forth. So bowings can help with ease of playing. They can also help with your emphasis in the tune. Down bows tend to be stronger than up bows, so you might want to put them in particular places where you want emphasis. The 1 and the 3 of the measure, it's nice if they can be on down bows. We want those to be stronger beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And one of my favorite things about bowings is how they can change the feel of the tune. In a strathspey, for example, you could have bowings that make it feel pretty choppy and sort of bouncy. Or really smooth and kind of lyrical. Okay, so with those goals in mind, let's go ahead and look at the tune and how we would choose bowings for it. So let's go ahead and choose our first set of bowings for this A part of Highlanders' Farewell to Ireland. This is going to be a sort of choppier, bouncier version of the tune. We're going to try and keep as many separate bows as we can. With the set of bowings that we're about to do, here's what the A part is going to sound like. kinds of bowings we're using in that version of the tune are separate bows, which are pretty understandable, and something called hooked bowing. This is when you put two notes in one bow, but you have a little pause between them. So for example, you might go up, up, with a little pause in between. Another way to separate two notes, even if they're in one bow, would be to sort of bounce the bow a bit. All right, so here's how this applies to the tune. So we start out with a down bow, which is pretty typical for the beginning of a tune to have a down bow on a downbeat. So we've got that quarter note, which gets us to the tip of our bow. And then for the next long short, we can try that hooked bowing. So up, up. Then we've got our down bow on the third beat of the tune on that quarter note. And then we can follow that up with another hooked bowing. So it's down, up, down, up. So that gives us that strong first and third beat. It also keeps us from running out of bow. Here's measure number 2. So we've got separate bows to start with. Down, up, down, up, down. But then we have another long short starting on an up bow, so we're gonna do that on a hooked bow. Down, up, down, up, down, up, up. Next measure is easy peasy, all separate bows. We've got 8 notes in that measure. Each quarter note is divided into either a long short or a short long. So because of that, if we start with a down bow, we'll always be playing a down bow on the beat. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And the last measure will be separate bows as well. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Okay, so here is that entire A part with separate bows and then hooked bows when we need to get back to a down bow on the next beat. Using the same principles for the B part, here's what we will end up with. So in the first measure, we have quarter, hooked bow, quarter, and then quarter. In the second measure, we have quarter, hooked bow, 4/16 notes, and then just a down, up for that long short. Next measure, all the quarter notes are divided again, so we can just do separate bows, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And the last measure, down, up, and then 2 quarters. You might notice on some of those short longs, I'm sort of leaping off the string on the second note. For example, on this pair of notes, I'm sort of hopping off the strings when I play that second note. This helps create that bouncy, sort of choppy feel to the STRATHSPEY. Here's the whole entire tune played in that way. Okay, so that's our first bowing option. Let's move on to our second bowing option, which is going to make the tune sound a little smoother. For this, all we're gonna do is play one bow per beat. Here's what the A part of the tune will sound like if it's played in that way. So playing it in that way, I'm not only doing something different with which notes are slurred, but I'm also just staying on the string to kind of keep it a little smoother rather than bouncing around. So here's what's happening. In that first measure, the quarter note is one beat. The next pair of notes is the next beat. So they're in one bow. The next quarter note is its own beat. And the next pair of notes is its own beat again. So all of that is just down, up, down, up. Next measure, same idea, one bow per beat. So down, up, down, up. Same thing with the next measure. Down, up, down, up. And the same thing with the last measure. Down, up, down, up. Pretty straightforward. So here that is one more time. Here's the B part if we apply the same principles to that. So a couple things about that. You might have noticed I made an exception for the 16th notes because I wanted those to be separate. And then I had to separate out the next two notes in order to get me back to a down bow on the downbeat. Another thing you might see is on my up bows, when I'm doing a long short on an up bow, I might still leave a little bit of breath between those notes, rather than, but you could do it either way. All right, here's the entire tune in that style. On to our last and final way of doing the bowing for this tune, let's try a little mix of those two different styles. This is probably my favorite way to play a strathspey because you get a sort of mix of different textures and it just keeps things interesting. Here's the A part if we were to sort of mix things up. So for measures 1 and 2, we're doing what we did in the first bowing option, so sort of a little bit more separated. Down, up, up, down, up, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, up. When we reach measure 3, we're going to smooth things out a little bit and play one bow per beat. Down, up, down, up, and then separate bows for the last measure. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Here's that whole A part. Now let's try doing the same thing in the B part. Doing exactly the same thing. Choppier in the first two measures. Down, up, up, down, up, down, up, up. And then our separate bows for the 16th notes. Down, up, down, up, down, up. And for the third measure of the B part, smoothing things out, one bow per beat. Down, up, down, up. And then separate bows for the last measure. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Once more through that B part. whole tune played in that mix of choppy and smooth. Alright, fiddlers, that wraps up today's fiddle video. I hope you enjoyed it. When it comes to choosing bowings for tunes, there are so many different options, and I wouldn't say there is one right answer, so feel free to experiment. These are just some guidelines that might help you out. Have a wonderful day, happy fiddling, and I will see you soon.